Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to get started here in a minute. We thought it would be interesting to hear about, well, before we get started, what policy interests were of interest to you throughout the 2020 legislative session. So you should see a poll up on your screen right now. You could go ahead and answer that. We'd love to get a feel for who's on the call or on the webinar with us today. So go ahead and take a few minutes just to, or not a few minutes, we'll leave it up for about a minute. We have this and then one other one. All right, we'll leave it up for 10 more seconds. It looks like the clear winner, though, at 80% is economic development, followed by taxes, and then transportation, education, and a little bit of other. If you can go into the questions section of your screen and type in what other means, we can try and touch on those topics. I'm going to ask one more question on the poll. So we're going to close that one. One more question. If any of those of you that had priority bills this session, we're curious if the early adjournment affected your ability to get those bills across the finish line. I know that the chamber had a few bills that we looked like they were on track, and then because of the early adjournment, didn't get them fully across the finish line. So we are just curious about that. So we'll leave this up for another 30 seconds, and then we will get started. Looks like a few folks were in the same position of the chamber that their priority bills didn't make it across the finish line. If you want to put that in the question section and just let us know what those are, I'd be curious to see. Okay, and we'll go ahead and close that poll and get started here. We're going to turn it over to our president and CEO of the chamber, who's going to welcome us. Gigi?
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining our chamber chat. This is Gigi Godwin, President and CEO of the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce, and our webinar today will be led by Tricia Swanson, our Vice President of Government Relations. But before we get started, before I turn it over to Tricia, I just want to remind all of you that you do not need to worry about taking notes. We will make this information available to you as always. And also during our chamber chat today, do feel free to use the chat box. Let us know what you're thinking. Send your questions. So with that, I don't want to hesitate any longer, except to say I hope you are all doing well throughout this tough time. And we're looking forward to more chamber chats in the future. So, but with this, we've got to find out what happened in Annapolis. Tricia, let's get started.
Thank you, Gigi. And we actually have a special guest with us today. Those of you that know Delegate Lily Chi finished up her second legislative session, and she has been a longtime advocate around economic development. Prior to being a delegate, worked for then County Executive Ike Leggett, and did fantastic work in the county. And so we are so lucky to have her representing us and also having her on the chamber chat today, and she's going to walk through some of the things with me. Lily, are you there?
Yes. Hi. Hi, Tricia. Hi, Gigi. Hi, everyone. It's great to be sort of back in action with the business community. I've been spending a lot of time since the Sunny Day working on COVID-19 response and coordinating the Chinese American community's donation efforts, which has been impressive, but it's good to talk about economic development. So how do we want to do this?
Yeah, so we'll just go through. I think you set it off in a perfect way. This chamber chat is not going to be focused on the COVID-19 responses. We had one that did that 2 weeks ago, and we thought it might be a nice break to look at what happened during the legislative session. Even though it was an early adjournment, it was the first early adjournment since the Civil War. And even though they adjourned early, they still passed 681 items of legislation. And some of those do impact you as a Maryland resident and as someone interested in economic development or a business owner. We have a pretty diverse, group of attendees today. So we're just going to go over some of our larger bucket items. And Lily, our delegate chief, feel free to chime in whenever you have obviously a firsthand knowledge of a lot of these as they went through your committee and you debated them. So we are excited to have your knowledge and expertise with us today. The first slide that we have on here, this session, we knew we were going to be facing a lot of proposed tax increases to pay for the Kerwin legislation, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But fortunately, because of the work of the business community and the support of elected officials like Delegate Shi, we managed to defeat a lot of the proposed tax increases. And you have the full list on your screen now. And we'll go over some of them, the proposed tax on services, a rollback of tax credits, potentially rolling back some of the investments made in opportunity zones, among other things. Delegate Shi, did you want to chime in? I want to thank you for voting against some of these tax increases that they managed to get out of the House, but I did note that you were one of maybe one or two Democrats that voted against it, and we really appreciate your standing for the business community on those issues.
Well, thank you, Tricia. It's never easy to go against the tide, right? I'm still here, so yeah, I appreciate your sentiment. This year was particularly difficult because as you alluded to, the Blueprint for Maryland's Future bill sort of sucked oxygen out of a lot of other great bills that could have otherwise advanced. And there was a strong sentiment to find the money wherever they could, or we could, to pay for education as the most important priority between two chambers. So on that front, there were several bills that were introduced trying to cut corners in terms of economic development and by way of sunsetting some incentives that business community has come to rely on. Some of them were good moves. They were reasonable, they were logical because they were not widely used or not effective based on data by the Department of Legislative Services study. But some of them actually would have benefited Montgomery County. So there were actually a slew of bills that were pretty apparent in terms of their efforts to find the money to pay for Kerwin. And the bill sponsors also did not hide that intention. Because the session was very short, and because I don't serve on the Ways and Means Committee, which many of these tax-related, incentive-related bills would have been heard and debated, we didn't have a chance to really weigh in on the front end, but all of us had the chance to vote on them. So I did vote against a couple of bills. I want to, just briefly mention several bills that you probably also have heard about that did pass in terms of tax bills. One is the digital download. So both chambers passed a bill that would have treated the digital download as if they were put on a CD, for example, right? So if you go to like in the old times Tower, whatever records, you would have paid for any music products that was put on a physical product. These days, you don't pay because they're digital. So they would have been treated as if they were still a commodity. And also there was a bill that would increase the sales tax on tobacco in order to both protect public health and raise some revenue. And those were fairly non-controversial compared to many other bills. And the other bills were all defeated. Either they did not pass the Senate or they just didn't have time to even get through the whole House. And on that note, I just want to compliment the Montgomery County Chamber and the leadership, and especially Tricia, for keeping a very close tab on this and communicating with us. It has been very helpful. I do want to point out that there was one good move on the tax front, which is we passed a bill that would allow the counties more time to pay back the state because of the revenue loss for paying back individuals. It was because of the Supreme Court case called Wayne case that came from 2013 Supreme Court ruling. For individuals that don't want to pay double tax if they live in both states. So that was actually a win for Montgomery County. All of us signed on to that bill to give the county more time to pay back tax, which would be helpful to us. There were a couple of opportunity zone tax bills that I was very concerned about, and I voted against one of them, which I thought would put Montgomery County in great disadvantage. So currently, if you invest your capital gains tax, which is the way opportunity zones tax is structured, you would have been able to deduct both the federal and the state taxes. But under that bill introduced, you would have only been able to take advantage of the federal tax, but not the state tax. I thought, in a very competitive region, this clearly would make Maryland less competitive for investors who would otherwise want to invest in anything, infrastructure, business, or any innovation companies or whatever in the opportunity zones. So I had to vote against that one. But the other bill related to opportunity zone that we passed was to limit to certain businesses to take out like a nail salons and massage parlors and all that kind of thing, which I thought would make sense,
Yeah, and I think with opportunity zones, it's worth noting that the chamber found those ones particularly frustrating because for those of you that don't know a lot about opportunity zones, you're welcoming in potentially investment from anyone across the United States. And so Maryland last session worked really hard to create some credits, additional credits around opportunity zones to make it really appealing for outside investors. So you're looking at outside dollars. And so the chamber's perspective, and we appreciated Delegate Chi's support on this, was why would we want to make it less appealing to have outside investors bring their capital gains into these underserved or underdeveloped communities. And so we were really happy to see the repeal of those tax credits around opportunity zones not move forward.
And I just want to add, and this is for future years advocacy, because I assume these bills will come back in some form, okay? They seem to create an open, like an easy win, where to find the money in terms of where to find the money.
Right.
So what I would advise the chamber to do is, there was a New York Times article that was very critical. I think it came last year about the opportunity zones and how it disproportionately benefited those people who don't need the tax cuts, like uber rich people who could pick and choose where to invest. And not all opportunity zones are the same. Some of them happen to be around great universities, and because students don't make much money, it shows low income, right? And they inadvertently got looped into opportunity zones and attracted a lot of investments in actually pretty wealthy areas instead of underprivileged communities. But those issues can be addressed through local policies and state policies to channel certain money to certain communities. I think to sweepingly, decouple state and federal tax is not a wide move, which was why I voted against it. But this is a talking point that I want to flag for the chambers in terms of how to address some legislators' mindset, which is this disproportionately benefits wealthy people who don't need the money, and we're not actually seeing investments in underserved communities, So, right. But I think over time, like Montgomery County has 14 designated opportunity zones. I know because my team worked on the designation with the Hogan administration. And these are all well thought of, well-defined opportunity zones that would be great. Any of them would be great, really, to bring money in. So thank you. And then I also want to say that, unfortunately, this is the year where when it comes to economic development, it goes the other direction. People were looking to cut incentives instead of expanding the economic opportunities through business incentives. So I was pleasantly surprised that my two bills actually got through and were promoted as business-friendly bills that we actually accomplished this year.
Let's move to that slide. Our positive business climate slide. The first one I have on here is your work on SBIR. So did you want to? Yeah, I was so proud of you because not a lot of pro-business bills passed, and then the House came out with their package, and Delegate Tricia, a brand new delegate, got a big win on 2 items of legislation around small business innovative research. Did you want to talk about those 2 bills?
Yes, so I introduced a similar bill the first year as a delegate, freshman delegate. I introduced a bill that would essentially do the same thing, to create a new state matching program for any small businesses in any line of research, and not just biotech or public health, but in any technology space. If they are able to secure any stage of SBIR funding, they would get a 25% matching from the state, because almost like 15, 20 other states have similar programs to aggressively attract and retain those, commercially viable companies. So it was turned into a study bill by Commerce, and the Commerce did finish the study in time for me to have the ammunition to say, okay, now the study comes back and supporting everything I wanted to do, so let's go ahead and do it. So I doubled down and introduced the 2 bills. One is the technical assistance bill for those companies, including those who have never received a single dollar from federal agencies but want to get on the SBIR competitive schedule to get grants, because it's free money, it's federal grants. Why not get more of that? We actually are number 4 in the nation as a state in terms of the win rates and the dollar amount we receive. We trail Massachusetts, California, and I think another state, which is unacceptable to me, with the richness of federal assets in our backyard. So one bill would create a technical assistance program, the other bill would create a matching program. Those 2 combined, the twin bills, will really advance our early stage small businesses in R&D of any industries. And we also expanded it so that TechCo will implement those bills together. So yes, I was pleasantly surprised that they actually got advanced together and quickly passed both houses, and they were promoted as business-friendly bills.
Absolutely. Well, and Delegate, there is a question on the SBIR bill. Where would somebody go to find a list of areas that it's funded?
A list of the industries? Is that what the question?
Maybe, yeah. Yes, the list of industries.
Okay, so there are 11 federal agencies that currently provide some form of SBIR grants, including the National Science Foundation, which technically is not a federal agency, it's like a quasi-government kind of thing. So if you receive any level of funding, phase 1 or 2, you can get a matching of 25%, up to $25,000 for phase 1 and up to $75,000 for phase 2. So if you have qualified from any of these 11 agencies, federal agencies, you can apply for that. It's not limited to any industries. It could be related to energy technology, or anything like that, or cybersecurity or whatever, because the programs are not set up yet, you should interact directly with TechCo on the specific details. But so we don't really define which industry. It's your qualification by the federal agencies. Okay.
Wonderful. Oh, and you did, to go back just a minute, back to opportunity zones, you did get a shout out. We have Susan Madden tuned in, and she wanted to thank you for the protection of opportunity zones, because when people think opportunity zones, they might just think business, but the Montgomery College Germantown campus is in a qualified opportunity zones, and so investments in that see investments in the college, which is incredibly important too.
Absolutely, and it's a big opportunity zone layered with a state level RISE zone, which unfortunately this time got gutted basically, because RISE zone, the argument was the RISE zone was not well used. It was because there's no money there. If we added more money there, people would have used it, but we went the other direction by taking it out. But this was probably not the biggest battle we wanted to fight in light of some much bigger items we should focus on.
Absolutely. While we're on the business climate slide, I did just want to highlight two other wins that we saw. The Small Business Development Center, they're doing incredible work across the state, just helping small businesses access resources and answer questions. And they are members of the chamber, and so we advocated for some additional funding for them, and they'll see $200,000 a year additionally in their budget. So we were really happy to see that. That's a bill that's gone on a couple of years and got passed this year, and so supporting the great work they're doing. And then for those pass-through entities that are on the webinar today, we did get that win where the state and local tax currently remitted to Maryland can now be filed as a tax on the entity, so it's not subject to that SALT limitation of $10,000. So there was no fiscal note at the state level for that. It's just a way to access some federal funding. And so that was a huge win for our pass-through entities.
That's true. Yes.
Okay. And so another big bucket that the chamber does focus on is talent and workforce development. And so, we're looking at historic investments in school construction was a huge win for especially Montgomery County, where we will see approximately $420 million new dollars in state funding. And that's almost double from what MCPS has historically received. And so from an education standpoint, that's fantastic, but also in terms of jobs here in the county and construction here in the county, that's a huge win and something that we were really excited to see. And then shifting to the operational side, we did talk about Kerwin and the blueprint for Maryland's future. While they were looking at raising taxes to pay for it, there are some parts of Kerwin that we're particularly interested in and excited about. MCPS is going to get an additional $800 million for educational operations, including improved career and college curriculum, additional investments in early childhood education, expansion of career and technical education. And so those are all fantastic measures that will strengthen our workforce here in the county so they can go right from high school into a great program at Montgomery College or into a career kind of ready to go. So those, while we're seeing a lot of news around increasing taxes to pay for Kerwin, Kerwin did have a lot of great pieces and components that will be at the benefit of our workforce here in the county and the state. Do you want to add anything about Kerwin, Delegate?
Well, I think I agree with everything you said. We do need to remember there's a lot for business community to take advantage of in terms of the Kerwin, especially the front end and the back end, which is early childhood education for their workforce, as well as the CTE, career and technical education. And I hope chamber members will continue to provide input in terms of how that should look like to be more connected to the workforce, because this is still an early stage in terms of our maturity of our game, in cultivating the needed workforce. But this is an opportunity to have such conversations, so the money will go to where it needs to go.
And I do think it's important to note, as we are looking at huge increases in education funding, when they started the session, we didn't know that we would be in the situation we're in now. And so as the Senate was debating the Kerwin legislation on the floor and looking at large monetary investments over the next 10 years, they did put an amendment on the bill that additional funding is halted in times of economic crisis. Right. And so there's an acknowledgement that we don't know what this looks like for Maryland's economy now and moving forward. And so what would have been prescribed as a lot of additional monetary over the next 10 years will potentially be halted to kind of react and respond to what we're looking at happening now with coronavirus. So I do think that that was an incredibly important amendment that I was glad to see put on. And I think relieve some of the concerns of the business community that Annapolis happens in a vacuum and isn't looking at what's going on around us. But I think that was a great addition to the Kerwin legislation, recognizing where we are now.
I agree. I just want to add another bill that you and I worked on together. It's not a monumental bill, but we got a lot of complaints when I was working in the county executive office from small businesses who find it either a nuisance or ridiculous that they have to pay annually the $300 filing fee and have to go through the filing process. So we tried to eliminate that, but it has been an uphill battle for like a decade. And so this year, my bill became a study bill, which is fine, but it was a step in the right direction in terms of looking at how Maryland can be more competitive with the 5 other jurisdictions around us, 5 other states around us that all have more competitive either filing schedule or fee schedule. So hopefully, this next year when we come back, we can look at this again. And I also want to flag some local bills that I hope the business community in general will pay attention to, because local bills don't get nearly as much attention, but several of us had to repeatedly vote against some local bills that we thought would be anti-business or hurt the market, actually. For example, one of the bills was repeatedly introduced in the past, I think, 3 years, was a bill that would, it was called the Just Cause Eviction. And then this year it was called the Stable Homes Act. It would essentially require landlords to provide a just cause before you can not renew the lease, okay? It was marketed as if this bill would prevent eviction, when what it actually does is to prevent a landlord from not renewing lease at the end of the term of the lease, okay? Which is a very different issue in my analysis. So I felt strongly, and several other of my colleagues felt like this would actually hurt the market, disincentivize small-time landlords, especially if they have to go to court to prove why some tenants should not be renewed. So it was defeated, but I just want to flag that because advocacy starts at local level. A lot of times, some of Montgomery County delegates may introduce bills that would actually hurt Montgomery County with all their good intention to help the tenants.
Absolutely. Before we move on from talent and workforce, I did want to highlight a small kind of technical bill, but it has a meaningful impact. USG prior to this session was not in Maryland statute. And so that means that now they will have a designated funding. And USG has been a tremendous partner in Montgomery County and with the chamber, and does imperative work in growing our workforce and talent. For those of you on the call that use apprenticeships, there was an apprenticeship tax credit up to $3,000 a year for each apprentice. And so if you have questions about that or interested in that, we are going to be sending out, again, Gigi said, but we are going to be sending out our end of session summary that highlights all of this, that has hyperlinks in it to the bills. And we'll also be sending out this recording. Delegate She touched on this, MCCC member priorities. Oh, no, not yet. That's the next slide. But a couple of members, this is a plug for me to say to all of you that as you're working through the legislative session, please, or prior to, please do reach out to the chamber with issues you're running into, whether you have a bill or not. If you're running into problems, please let us help you or advocate with you on a particular piece of legislation. These are ones that members had reached out to us for assistance on, whether it's tax exemptions for data centers. We had a brewery reach out. They couldn't, talking about a local bill that has a meaningful impact. The code said certain breweries can cater at events. So in addition to bringing beer, they can bring food. The code was written prior to a certain brewery license was created. And so all that this bill did just said that these certain classifications of breweries can now cater also. Again, a really small, simple bill, but makes a huge impact on these breweries. There's one, the member priority, Frit wanted to be able to have an annual marketplace consumption license versus a daily, which is a huge administrative hurdle for them. And that was another local bill that moved. Duplicative taxes for caterers was a big one that a member company reached out and asked for our assistance on, and that made it through. And then there was an anti-consumer choice energy pilot program that didn't make it through also. So again, as you're working on advocacy, the members that are listening, please regularly reach out to me at the chamber or Gigi and let us know how we can launch your efforts and emphasize the work that you're doing. I did want to talk about transportation too. There was one bill that made it out that was really, really exciting. Delegate Jared Solomon had a bill that would just charge Maryland with entering into good faith negotiations with Virginia to extend the MARC train service down into Virginia and over to Delaware. And that's potentially very exciting as we look at future investments in transit. That was an exciting bill that made it in the last couple minutes of session. And then future opportunities, Delegate Chi, you touched on this, the $300 annual filing fee. We really appreciated your leadership on this, and we were sad to see that it not make it through this year, but we're hopeful in future years that it will make it through, because we're not, as you highlighted in your testimony on the bill hearing, we're not competitive at all with surrounding jurisdictions in requiring businesses to annually pay the $300. So we hope future years we can look at doing that.
It actually passed the House.
Yes, we got it. We got it half of the way, and then I blame the session ending early, because we did make it out of the because of your hard work. It made it out of the House and over to the Senate in plenty of time, and then we adjourned early, and they just weren't taking up smaller bills. They were just trying to focus, I guess, on larger ones, but it was frustrating to not see that one. The other one another one we were disappointed that didn't move. There was a bill that would have a commission. So we talked a lot about, different tax increases that were proposed, rolling back up tax credits. There were a few bills that would create a commission to look at Maryland's economy more holistically and would make recommendations. We see every session. This session was the worst, but I don't think we're going to suddenly stop seeing this. Every session, there are a multitude of proposed tax increases. And there's not really a global strategy to kind of look at this in a more holistic level and make some real recommendations as to our tax policy and tax code and what is making a difference, and how can Maryland be more economically competitive? Is it not having certain tax credits, and therefore we can lower the corporate income tax? There's a lot of different options. And so there was a commission that was going to look at all of these things, and that bill didn't pass. So the chamber is going to be continually advocating that we do have a commission look at it more holistically and make some more sound recommendations versus having, piecemeal approach to tax increases. The next one, for those of you, there are some members on the call today that are a Montgomery County green business, Montgomery College being one of the original kind of creators and founders of this program. We worked with Delegate Emily Shetty to launch this county program statewide, and it made it through the House and didn't make it through the Senate, similar to Delegate Chi's bill. So we were disappointed to not see that make it all the way. There was also tax credits for businesses impacted by the Purple Line. This is a bill that has gone through many different years and hasn't made it out of the House. And this year it made it out of the House and made it out of the Senate, but because it didn't make it back over to the House, it didn't pass, which was really unfortunate. And then there was another one for those of you in the chamber that are familiar with our Veterans Institute for Procurement. There was a bill that would look at how Maryland could help its veterans hit that procurement goal. And that didn't move forward either. So we were not happy to see that. Delegate Chia, were there any bills or any other bills of yours that didn't make it through that you're looking forward to introducing in future sessions?
Yeah, I actually am glad you mentioned the Green Business Certification and the Purple Line. These are all good bills for the business community, and they are forward-looking or addressing some immediate needs. One of the bills that I, at the last minute, managed to pass my own committee, Economic Matters Committee, but didn't have time to be voted on in the House because of the shortened session, was a bill that would make Maryland more aggressive in driving innovation economy in clean energy. So it would support in a more aggressive fashion clean energy innovation and clean tech companies. we actually have like 150 in aggregate, which is a small number for a state of our ability in clean tech companies. And some other states like New York is, an even smaller state. I think it was either Colorado or something is much more aggressive in pursuing those opportunities. So I introduced the bill in partnership with University of Maryland and with the Maryland Clean Energy Center to try to drive economic development by creating a new industry that holds tremendous promise, especially for a progressive state that has a lofty goal to reach certain RPS by a certain year. This is a golden opportunity for us to make some small investment and cultivate a bigger win down the road. Because currently 85% of our early stage R&D dollars go to biotech companies. We can use the same model to also cultivate a new industry like clean energy, which has tremendous job opportunities to be had. But it passed our committee and it didn't have a chance to be voted on. So I got a lot of great support on that one, and I hope the business community could also throw your support behind that.
Wonderful. Okay. I think now we can open it up to questions. There were some questions around the governor's traffic relief plan. There were a number of bills that were introduced that would clarify the P3 program or potentially derail the governor's plan to move forward with the I-270 and 495. And the chamber is absolutely supportive of the 270 piece and the American Legion Bridge piece. But somebody pointed out on the chat the importance of kind of moving forward with construction projects to kind of add a boost in our economy. And so potentially being able to move forward with the 270 and the American Legion Bridge projects, I think that's an important thing to point out, that construction is still able to work and move forward and still create jobs. So with the current climate we're in, I do think that that's an important thing to note. We'll wait and see if there are any other questions. And if not, I know the governor is set to do some announcement at 1 o'clock, so we can make sure you have time to maybe get some more coffee and tune into that. And if there are no other questions, I'm going to put Gigi back on. Gigi, are you there?
I'm here. Yes, I am. So, well, I want to start by saying thank you so much, Delegate Lily Chi. What an exciting time for you early in your time serving, representing all of us in Annapolis. But want to thank you for joining us today. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And I want to encourage you to join us again next Friday on April 17th. We're going to have another chamber chat, and we're always here for you. We appreciate very much hearing from you by any means, phone calls, emails, text messages. We're always waiting on receive, looking forward to speaking with you. So with that, I'm going to say thanks, everybody, and we'll get all the information out to you very soon. And thanks, Tricia, for moderating once again today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gigi, and thank you, Delegate Chi.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.